All right, we're back. What's up?
Judge, I move to strike all of Dr. Chambliss's opinions regarding ethylene glycol. He's acknowledged that he's not an expert. I don't think his expertise in the area has been established.
Did you want to respond?
I'm opposed to that.
You what?
I oppose that motion, Your Honor. Dr. Chambliss has been very forthright about the limits and the extent and the nature of his expertise, and that's for the jury to decide how much weight they want to attach to Dr. Chambliss's testimony.
What's the rule nowadays with respect to what constitutes expert opinion that can be heard by the jury in Wisconsin?
And I'm sorry, I'm not sure I understand exactly.
It's my impression that the ultimate test is whether or not the proposed expert, the information that the person has is superior to that of a layperson, and therefore can be of assistance to the jury.
Well, I think in terms of qualifications, something more is needed than just having more information than these folks do. Otherwise, I could testify as an expert. I'm by no means an expert in ethylene glycol, but I know a lot more than the jurors do. I mean, I could tell them something about ethylene glycol, or somebody could read Wikipedia and find out something about it and then give a speech about, these are the things they observed. He himself was asked the direct question, are you an expert? And he said, I'm not an expert in ethylene glycol. He gave opinions yesterday based on that. He hadn't done any research. Just reading some articles last night, I don't think makes him an expert in ethylene glycol. And I don't think he has the qualifications to testify regarding the toxicology. He also has expressed a lack of familiarity with the possible ranges in the area. He says he hasn't done any additional research. He hasn't had a case in 20 years. What else? He relies on a toxicologist. If he does give toxicology type opinions, he even was unfamiliar, I think, with how you would calculate the amount in the stomach, which I think sort of lies at the heart of this. And so based on all that, and again, his own testimony saying I'm not an expert in ethylene glycol, I moved to strike all of his testimony regarding it.
Well, I think when a witness is asked whether he or she is an expert, they answer in their own language, and that is, he's answering in the language of medicine, and you're putting the question to him in the language of law. So we need to interpret it to determine what the actual meaning is. And I think that he may not feel comfortable enough with his expertise in the area that he would refrain from referring the matter to someone who's in medical terms an expert in that area. That doesn't change the fact that I would expect him to have a greater breadth of knowledge of the subject than would a layperson, by reason of his being A, a physician, and B, a pathologist. And having at least had some contact with ethylene glycol poisoning in the past. So he's way above, I think, the rest of us in that respect. And yet when he answers the question about whether he's an expert, he's saying, no, I'm going to refer that to a
Forensic toxicologist.
A forensic toxicologist. You took the words right out of my mouth.
Yes.
It's like a lawyer being asked a question about patent law or copyright law, or a lawyer who handles malpractice cases being asked a question about the criminal law, and may be able to give you some information which would be helpful to a layperson, but would not. But he'd be flirting with malpractice to answer it. So I think I'm going to look at it in that light, and I think that you've done an examination of him regarding his credentials and regarding his experience and prior statements he may have made that will be adequate for the jury to assess his credibility when weighed against that which is opposed to it, or just when weighed, period. And so I'm going to deny your motion.
Well, just a couple points, Judge. In looking at the rule, it says if the testimony is based upon sufficient facts or data. I don't believe this. I believe he has testified that he did not have sufficient facts or data, or maybe he hasn't acknowledged that, but I think it's clear that he has not had sufficient facts or data regarding the ethylene glycol testing or anything else in this case to form an opinion. testimony is a product of reliable principles and methods. That's really not what I'm focused on here. And last, the witness has applied the principles and methods reliably to the facts of the case. And, I think that's a problem here too. Actually, I can retract all that. I just read the federal rule rather than the Wisconsin rule.
Which is markedly different.
Yes, but and I was looking for the will assist the trier of fact language, and I was wondering why it wasn't there. Will assist the trier of fact, and if he's not properly qualified, as I don't think he is, then he's not assisting the trier of fact. He's actually misleading them, and he's giving a very off-the-cuff kind of testimony here. And I don't know, maybe I misunderstood the court's analogy, but asking my opinion on virtually anything outside the criminal law, unless I happen to know like trade secrets law because there's a criminal case about it, but all other, it's been the 20 years that it's been for him in ethylene glycol, for me in trust and estates. Maybe I know more than the average juror, but I don't know much. I'd hate to allow a court to let me testify about that.
I suspect that if I quizzed you about capital gains law, you would know more than the average person.
I would bet you're wrong. I've never had a capital gains to worry about.
Very good, very good. The test will be at 3. No, I think that he meets the standard under our law, and you're quite correct in drawing a distinction between our law and that of the federal courts. So I'm going to deny your motion. Anything else before we bring the jury back out?
Nothing from me, Your Honor.
No, Judge.
Would you ask them to come in, please? Go ahead, Mr. Chambliss.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Doctor, where did we leave off? We were talking about the hypopharyngeal muscles. Is that?
Yeah, I was describing the location of the hypopharyngeal muscles with respect to the epiglottis and describing hemorrhage on the mucosa.
Now, and what is the mucosa of the hypopharyngeal muscle?
It's the inner lining.
And you observed that there was hemorrhage there.
Yes, I did.
And how is that relevant to a determination or an opinion as to whether or not Julie Jensen was suffocated?
Well, the finding itself has to be explained. Having just a hemorrhage can be from a number of scenarios. If the person has been resuscitated, you can get hemorrhage of the hypopharyngeal muscles. In this case, there is no tube present in the airway that could explain this area of hemorrhage. If you have pressure over the mouth or the mouth is pressed into something, you can have enough pressure exerted on the blood vessels in the lining of the hypopharynx that will rupture and produce hemorrhage. That's another explanation for how you can get these findings. You have to take the finding and find a particular scenario that could explain that. I think smothering does explain this particular finding in the absence of any attempts at resuscitation.
So this finding is consistent with the suffocation?
Yes, it is.
Or it would be consistent also with efforts at resuscitation?
I'm sorry?
Or it could also be consistent with efforts at resuscitation if there were efforts of resuscitation?
Yes, it would be.
But in the absence of any efforts of resuscitation, is it consistent with anything other than suffocation?
It's consistent with suffocation or smothering. It is consistent with that.
Now, up underneath the cardiovascular system, you've indicated there were multiple petechiae. Can you tell the jury what petechiae are?
They're actually pinpoint size hemorrhages that you can see anywhere in the body. You can see them on the skin surface, or you can see them on the organs of the body. They represent the rupture of small blood vessels in those locations, and they represent the size of a pinhead. And they're commonly associated with pressure exerted on the blood vessels and resulting in a rupture and a pinpoint-sized hemorrhage. They're quite often seen in asphyxial deaths, such as suffocation or smothering, a heart attack, any type of resuscitation. Those are examples of how you get petechiae.
Now, and I'm wondering about the mechanism of injury. You indicate it's associated with suffocation, but what is the mechanism that would cause those petechiae? For example, are those petechiae in the same general vicinity as the bruising or the subcutaneous injury that was discovered along the anterior left chest wall?
They are on the left side of the pericardial sac. They're in the lower lobe of the left lung. These are both in the location of where the small amount of hemorrhage involves the front of the second, third, and fourth ribs. They're due to pressure, again, that's exerted, and the pressure passes up to those particular locations and is sufficient enough to rupture smaller blood vessels.
Now, doctor, I also want to talk to you about the life cycle of a bruise, how a bruise, where it commences and how long it lasts before it goes away and what the healing process is. Now, once a person is bruised, does the bruise continue to develop in its life cycle after death, or does the development of bruising stop at the point of death?
It stops at the point of death, even though people will say that you can get some post-mortem bruising from handling the arms if it's very close to the time of death. But if it's a day or 2 days before, the bruising tends to turn color to a green, to a yellow. It goes from blue, yellow, green, and those particular color changes over the course of the aging of the bruise. So it starts to increase in size and change in color.
So with respect to the hemorrhaging that you had seen along the soft tissue and muscles attached to the left, second, third, and fourth ribs anteriorly, you only saw that upon the typical Y incision and the retracting of the skin. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You didn't see it before you retracted the skin, so it wasn't visible from the outside.
That's correct.
Now, would you expect that had the hemorrhaging that was along that chest cavity wall, would you have expected that hemorrhaging to become evident as a bruise on the outside of the chest had it been permitted to develop in the normal life cycle of a bruise?
You could expect it to come forward up to the soft tissues all the way to the skin surface with time. So yes, you can expect that.
But you had not seen that?
I did not see it at all.
So does that give you any, does that provide you with any guidance as to the likely time interval that existed between the point where this hemorrhaging occurred and the time of death?
Well, first of all, it's a small amount of hemorrhage. Secondly, microscopic examination gives you the time frame for the hemorrhage. The depth of the hemorrhage and the extent of the hemorrhage, if it's more than a small amount, if it's a much larger area of hemorrhage, would allow that to pass up through the soft tissues to the skin surface. So it has more to do than just the time frame. It also has to do with some other factors.
Now, you indicated that these findings with respect to the cardiovascular system and the gastrointestinal system were consistent with a suffocation death. Is that?
That's a fair statement. Yes, they are consistent with a suffocation death.
Were there any other factors that you observed in the at the time of the autopsy that are consistent with the finding of a suffocation death?
At the time of the autopsy, the only additional thing would be, as I mentioned, the petechiae located on the heart, pericardial sac, and lung, plus the hypopharyngeal muscle hemorrhage.
Now tell me about the mechanism for injury that would cause the petechiae to the lungs. Is that because of pressure, or is that because of the sudden absence of oxygen or air? What causes the petechiae to the lungs?
It's actually a combination of both. Asphyxia is the lack of oxygen. So it's pressure, therefore creating a lack of oxygen state. That means you can't breathe, either from compressing your diaphragm, compressing your lungs, compressing your airway in the strangulation, or compressing your mouth. Any of those particular locations cannot allow you to get the right amount of oxygen. So it's not only the pressure itself, but the lack of oxygen makes those blood vessels much more fragile, and they will rupture. And you'll get the small pinpoint size hemorrhages in certain locations. They may be widespread, or they may only be in smaller locations.
Now, under the respiratory system, you indicated that the mucosa is coated by a small amount of bloody fluid. Is there anything anatomically or forensically significant about that?
It's not something that I could be specific about. So it's something we see, but it's not something you can be specific about.
So you can't draw any inferences from that?
No, I can't.
Thank you, Doctor. I have no further questions.
Shelby?
Dr. Chambliss, you've never prepared a report in this case.
I prepared a preliminary report, not a complete report.
Never prepared a report that had an opinion as to cause of death, right?
That's correct.
You came in here yesterday, you had no opinion on cause of death, right?
That's correct.
And now you're testifying about observations that are included in your report that lead you to conclude there's a suffocation.
Observations that have other information that helps me explain them.
Well, at the time you wrote this report, when you said that you needed further information,
Further studies, yes, pending further studies.
which means you need more information.
Information would be one of the things, yes.
And at that time, you didn't know about the presence, absence, or anything else about ethylene glycol, true?
I did not.
You didn't consider it in any way, shape, or form.
I was here basically to tell what I had, so no, I didn't consider it.
And so not knowing, so ethylene glycol didn't impact this report at all, true?
It is a contributing factor, so it does have an impact.
Doctor, your autopsy report, you didn't even know about ethylene glycol. So isn't it fair to say that ethylene glycol did not impact your decision at all in making your decisions here?
I didn't follow your question. Are we saying at the time I initially completed the autopsy or during the testimony?
No, at the time you completed the autopsy.
No, it did not.
And you had all these observations of petechiae and small amount of tissue hemorrhage when you wrote this report.
That's why it was pending further studies, so they needed to be explained.
And you don't have all the information that's been compiled since then, right?
I have been provided with information here, and I don't know of additional information.
Tell me what the information is that now causes you to say things that weren't sufficient to give a cause of death then, but now become sufficient for you to say it's a suffocation.
I think I've answered the question that these particular items do hold some significance in light of additional information. If I had no additional information, they stay undetermined.
Could I have the last question read back, please?
Question, tell me what the information is that now causes you to say things that weren't sufficient to give a cause of death then, but now becomes sufficient for you to say it's a suffocation.
The information about the low level of ethylene glycol, which I felt was a contributing factor to the death, and the information about the photographs that showed me how Julie Jensen was found at the scene with her arm positioned in an awkward fashion, her left arm passing across the anterior left chest and coming out from under her body towards her right side, which gives me an explanation for the small amount of hemorrhage on the anterior left chest, and the compression of her nose from the photographs into the pillow, distortion of her nose and mouth, plus no findings of resuscitation other than EKG pads. The EKG pads are very common, just check your heart rate type of situations that will be associated with a first responder. The explanation of the hypopharyngeal muscle hemorrhage can go along with suffocation or smothering because there's no resuscitation in this case.
Now, you met with Detective Ratzberg March 31st, 1999, right?
I couldn't answer, I guess I did.
Okay. And there's a likelihood he showed you these photos then, right?
Likelihood, I can't answer that question. I don't know.
You may have seen these photos before, right?
I can't tell you that. I don't have an independent recollection of it.
So none of this may be new to you, right?
I can't answer the question. I don't like to speculate, as I said before.
Now, speaking of which, you said that from time to time you have occasion to rely upon Dr. Christopher Long's views about ethylene, well, not about ethylene glycol, but about toxicology.
I talk to him twice a week.
Okay. And his opinion would be helpful to you about this case, I take it?
It can be if it's just utilizing toxicology levels, but you always have to look at it in light of everything else.
I take it this is Dr. Wallace. Okay. You're gonna be 170 pages, that's it.
I show you Exhibit D17.
Excuse me, what date was that one?
Oh, a second.
Yeah, I just needed to get it out of here.
And Dr. Chambliss, you can turn to page 132, beginning at line 21.
Counsel, could you give me just a minute to get my...
Well, and I'm going to ask you to read the rest of page 132, page 133, and through line 9 of 134.
Can you repeat your question, please?
Sure, I'm just asking you to read from line...
I'm not sure which page, though. Can you do that again?
Line 21, page 132. All of 133 through line 9 of 134. If you could just read that to yourself.
You lost me again.
Line 21, page 132.
Okay. All the way to the end?
All the way to the end of that page, all
Okay.
of page 133, and the first 9 lines of page 134.
Okay. Okay?
All right. And if you consulted Dr. Long, it appears he'd be of the view that you could have any amount in the blood and have an ethylene glycol death, true?
From this, according to his deposition, yes.
And if Dr. Long told you that, would you accept that?
Not necessarily.
Even though you consult with him twice a week?
Even though I consult with him twice a week, the ultimate decision for me is based upon all the factors in the case. So I do consult with a forensic toxicologist, but I also take into account everything on the case. It's ultimately my decision on the case.
Okay. Now, so if a police officer tells you to believe an inmate convict witness, then you have to accept the information you're given. If a forensic toxicologist gives you some information, then you have to do some further analysis.
Yes, because we don't treat just levels. I'm a morbid anatomist. I look at the body. I don't always just look at the levels.
But that's your determination as to why this wasn't an ethylene glycol death, was only on the levels.
No, it's what the findings are from the autopsy report, and that's the most significant thing. They are the findings you have with suffocation and smothering. Those are more important than ethylene glycol, which is a contributing factor.
You had all those findings December 4th, 1998, and you could not come up with a cause of death, true?
No, I did not. I did not have additional information. As you said, all I was working from was pending further studies. And if we're working just from pending further studies, those things were not explained. They needed to be explained. They weren't explained. That's why it's pending further studies.
So all you need to come up with an opinion is whatever part of the picture a prosecutor presents to you in a short period of testimony.
Or a defense attorney.
I'd say, well, would you like to see Dr. Spiro's report about her depression and the possibility that this was suicide?
Again, I'm a morbid anatomist. If you give me anatomical findings, I'll go with anatomical findings over toxicology findings anytime.
Now, the petechiae in the cardio area,
Yes.
those could be post-mortem artifacts, right?
No, they are not.
They could be, right?
I would say no.
Okay. Could those be from her kids jumping on the bed?
No.
Why?
I have not seen those situations, so in my experience, I'd say no.
All right, so you're telling me that, just as a for instance, if an 8-year-old child ran in the bed and jumped on her and caught her with a knee, that couldn't cause this injury to that caused the petechiae.
Objection, Your Honor. A series of irrelevant hypothetical questions being posed here.
I take the whole case as is. I take the hemorrhage that's there. I take the petechiae. I don't separate out items. And I won't say, in this case, that's the way it happened. So I'm answering your question because I don't take them separately.
Let me see, you have photographs up there still, Doctor?
Yes.
Show you S12. That's the photograph depicting Julie Jensen's arm in a little bit of an unusual spot.
Yes, it is.
And it's apparent from that photograph that she's had medical attention before that photograph was taken, right?
Yes, it is.
You can see an EKG pad, correct?
That's correct.
And you can see that EKG pad on her right bottom of her rib cage approximately?
Yes, it does show up in the photograph.
Okay. And she has 3 more pads on her, right?
Yes, she does. Well, actually, she has 2, both sides of the upper chest beneath the clavicle and that right lower, so she has 2 more.
Both sides of the upper chest? And isn't it both sides on the bottom too?
I just have in my report, unless I'm incorrect there, I'm working from my report.
And in order to put those pads on her upper chest, she would have had to have been moved before this photograph, right?
Not
The
necessarily.
position she's in?
Not necessarily.
Well, she's laying right on top of this shoulder, and there's a pad on the upper chest, up in this area, right? The clavicle area?
She would have been lifted to place those right up in that area. We see that pretty frequently on cases that come to our office.
And maybe this is a medical term, but what's the difference between lifted and moved?
She was moved.
In the photograph, when you did the demonstration with Mr. Chambliss, you had like this, right? Because this is the little bruising in the rib up here.
Not the way you're demonstrating it horizontally. It's more of an angle downward towards your right lower.
Her arm's down like this, right?
Yes, that's the way we tried to angle it, yes.
The way you tried to angle it?
That's what I attempted at the time. I described what I was doing.
Yesterday, well, the fingernail mark on the neck, the color of that is yellow, right?
I described it as a fingernail mark, but it is a yellow color, yes.
And I guess you didn't describe it. You said it's
Resembles it.
curved, resembling a fingernail
Yeah,
mark.
resembles.
And it's yellow.
Yes.
And based on what you just testified to, when Mr. Chambliss was asking you questions, that means it's a little bit of an older bruise, right?
No, I didn't say it was an older, it's a perimortem type thing. When we're saying yellow, this is a totally different thing with respect to a superficial injury. It's not a bruise. This is an abrasion.
Okay, well, Mr. Chambliss had been asking about how bruises work, and my understanding was like level 2 or 3 or 4 or something, where the color change shifted to yellow.
Yeah, it would be red, purple, greenish to yellow in that particular range, and it would be blending type of changing, color changes. And it varies according to the age of the change that it takes place.
Okay. Now the hypopharynx, the sort of the area behind the throat.
I'm sorry, Judge.
That's okay. I feel better.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
If it's important, go ahead.
No, I'm trying to figure out how to turn it off. This is a brand new phone. I don't know how to turn it off. Hopefully I can turn it off. I apologize, Council. Jeez, I don't know how to do this. Excuse me. Oh, boy.
You want someone to just take it and...
Yeah, just take it outside. Somebody take this. Just take it outside. I just bought this because I came in from California. I couldn't stay in touch with people. I apologize. Jeez, what a surprise. Sorry about that, Counselor. You repeat your question.
No problem. The hypopharynx.
Yes.
And that's what you're describing. What was it, petechiae back just beyond the part you can see in the throat.
That's actually hemorrhage. So actually, when you look in the back of the throat and upper airway, and when we remove those structures, there is an extension of the upper portion of the esophagus called the pharynx. And the muscles around there are the hypopharynx area.
Right, and that could be completely post-mortem artifact, right?
No, that's not post-mortem artifact.
Okay, and so if Dr. Mainland, the current Kenosha County medical examiner in a prior hearing testified that it could be postmortem artifact. You would disagree with that?
Totally.
And again, when you wrote the report, you didn't say anything that meant suffocation at that time, right?
It needed to be explained.
Similarly, if Dr. Mainland testified that the small amount of soft tissue hemorrhage could have appeared could have been caused by the body being moved, you would apparently disagree with her on that point too?
Yes, I do.
And the total amount of additional time you spent studying this case before giving your opinion that this was a suffocation is just the time in the courtroom, really?
It was the items provided to me, yes. It would have been at the time when I'm here at the courtroom.
Would more time be helpful to you?
It's not going to change my opinion about the cause of death in this case.
You've had occasions where you initially thought one cause of death, and then you did more study, and you found out that it should be changed, right?
Yes, usually in drug cases.
And that happens to medical examiners, right?
Yes, it does.
And in fact, that's why generally people wouldn't write a report until, even if they had an initial idea of what the case was about or what the cause of death was, they'd investigate as much information as there was before making a determination, right?
That would be the normal way of doing it, yes.
And sometimes things aren't what they seem at first glance. Fair to say?
That's a fair statement, yes.
And would it matter to you if the witness relied upon in the hypothetical had 7 prior convictions,
No.
was facing 2 pending cases, was receiving years off his prison stay in exchange for giving that information, had been selling phony visas to people in Lithuania and crushing their hopes and dreams for $2,500? Would any of that matter to you if he was a sophisticated con man and liar? Would that matter?
It doesn't tend to matter in most cases because I don't get that information. I'm a morbid anatomist. I see what the autopsy findings are, and the findings are consistent, then I have approximate cause of death.
No further questions.
Any question?
So after the direct and cross and redirect and recross and re-redirect and recross, has any of this altered your opinion as to the cause of death of Julie Jensen?
No, it hasn't.
What is the cause of death of Julie Jensen?
Asphyxia by smothering or suffocation, that's her cause of death. A contributing factor could be ethylene glycol, but the approximate cause is asphyxia by suffocation, because if that had not occurred, she may not have died.
Thank you. No further questions.
Question? You may step down.
Thank you.